This is Lesson 2 for beginning students of the Dance of the Eye and the Hand. Today we will be making ink and loading our brushes, looking at basic brush movements, and doing our first model in Lee script strokes. So in this series of lessons we will be focused on Lee style calligraphy. It's one of the five major styles of Chinese calligraphy. Every Lee stroke has three movements: a beginning, a moving, and an ending. So if I'm doing a horizontal stroke, I start at the left side, I go the opposite direction, the direction I'm going, and back again. If I'm going to do a vertical stroke, I start at the top, I go up, I come down, and I go up again. So vertical, I go up, down, back. As we're doing these three motions, I'm not starting in the center of the character and going all the way over. I'm starting right near the end, just a little bit of movement, then the length of that stroke, and a movement back. So what I'm doing is closing each of these strokes, sort of encapsulating that energy. So left, right, left. I think of it as the swinging of a pendulum. If you've ever done any Tai Chi, generally any motion you start in the opposite direction, the direction you're moving, and back in again. So it's just that kind of rocking movement for every single Lee style stroke, whether it's a line or even a dot. Even the dot has left, right, left. First, we want to prepare our ink. You should have an ink stone if you're grinding your own ink. This is the cover to the ink stone. You take just a little bit of water. Here, not even half a teaspoon. Put that into your stone. You don't want to start with a lot of water. The more water you start with, the longer and longer you're going to have to grind. So just a little bit of water. You can always add more. I take my ink stick, I hold it perpendicular to the stone firmly, and I just start making gentle circles around and around, giving a little bit of pressure, but not to the point where I'm gritting my teeth, but enough pressure so that the ink stick engages with the ink stone. Now, as a note, you can use bottled ink, and that's a quick way to get started if you're on limited time, but I find the practice of grinding ink each time you paint as a necessary first step to sort of get you grounded, to relax you. It's a meditative exercise and one that brings you into the moment. Grinding ink takes often longer than you think it should, and the first question that's asked is, how do I know when it's ready? And the quick answer is later than you think. One way to tell is if you look at the surface of the ink stone, the more you grind, sooner or later you will start seeing dry areas on the stone. And that's telling me we are moving from water to the beginnings of ink. I want to keep on grinding though until it gets thicker and thicker. It is very rare to overgrind ink. I've only had one experience with it, and that was with a young adolescent male who was grinding the length of my entire demonstration and got something that looked like tar. It takes a lot of effort to get that far, and you are more at risk of stopping sooner than late. So I keep grinding. I might be thinking about, what am I going to paint today? What is today's lesson? Well, today's lesson is doing basically strokes, dots, horizontal lines, vertical lines, down to left, down to right. So I might spend this time staring at the model, trying to anticipate how I would approach today's lesson. Or if I'm doing a landscape or a flower or a bird, to be looking at that model, to be considering what I'm going to do. So as I look back at the ink again, I'm seeing that it is beginning to show some dry areas. One and the best way to test your ink, and I'm just going to dab this on a little bit of tissue so that my ink stick will dry. I don't want to put this back in the plastic. I don't want to put it away too soon before it's well dried. Put that aside. Okay, if I'm starting with a brush I've already used, again, I want to get it fully wet and use the dish or the bowl to wick off the excess water. I want to pay attention to creating parallel lines with my hairs. I don't want to twist my hairs as I begin to load the brush. I want to take long horizontal strokes to get all those hairs parallel. Now I have a damp brush with a point. I come back to my ink dish. I pick up a little bit of ink. I go back to my dish, and again, just nice, slowly, carefully blend that ink up into the brush. I can use the side of it to wick off any excess that there might be. I can also tap on the bowl, and what I see on the side gives me an idea of what's in the brush. The other way to test it is I generally keep a test sheet, the same Schwen paper that I'm using to paint on, and I will press and hold. And I'll look for how fast did that spread and what color is it. It spread quite fast. So I'm going to take a little bit of tissue here, fold it over, and just gently touch the brush to it. The brush is a sensitive tool, so you don't need to do much to adjust it. I'll pick up a little bit more ink, go back to my dish, and work it up some more. So your relationship to the brush is a high maintenance relationship. That's true for the beginner, for the intermediate, and for the master. You are always tending the brush. I'm going to take a little more moisture out. If I turn my brush, I can see a shine coming off of it, and that tells me there's just a little bit too much moisture in there. Again, dabbing it to get that out, then not going back to the ink stone, but just going back to the dish, reworking that. Let's try this again. We're going to press and hold. This time, significantly slower, just a little bit of a bleed. I'm going to put a little bit more ink into it and brush it some more. One guidance is when you have first prepared your ink, first loaded your brush, it's going to be loose. In about 5-10 minutes, generally it'll settle down and you'll have a good solid black. If it doesn't, that means there's still too little ink or unmixed ink, or too much water in the brush and you need to make adjustments. Another guidance would be, now that you have your brush loaded, put it down, go turn on the tea water, let it boil, make yourself a cup of tea, then come back and pick up your brush again. And just those couple of minutes of resting, the brush will have settled down enough. So that's preparing our brush to paint. Now we have our model for today, which is practicing basic leaf strokes. We have dots, we have horizontals, verticals, down to left and down to rights. One point to make with practicing from a model, I want you to not only pay attention to trying to reproduce each one of these strokes, I also want you to pay attention to the white space between the strokes. From the very, very beginning, we want to focus into the white areas, because in Chinese calligraphy and Chinese painting, the white areas are often more important than where you've put the ink. And that is a strange concept to a Western mind, but basically you're allowing the space for the void, for the chi, for space, however you want to describe it. So you want to pay as much attention to where you're not painting as to where you are painting. Another suggestion about using models is I want you to try as best you can to recreate the size and the spacing on the model provided. The reason for this is I want to train not only your skill at making that stroke, but your skill at laying out an entire page. That's part of training the eye as well as training the hand. Another suggestion is, if I make the stroke and I blow it, don't do it 10 more times trying to do it right. In more cases than not, repeating it 10 times, you'll be repeating the same mistake you made here, repeated that 10 more times and making it become habit. Just try to follow the model as best you can. If I blow this stroke, that's too bad. Let's just move on to the next one. In time, your skills will all move along. So resist the temptation to get hooked on one particularly difficult stroke and thinking if you do it 300 times, you're going to master it. The problem probably is not with what your brush is doing, but what your eye is doing. You may not be seeing what you need to see. So if you blow a stroke, spend some time just looking at it, just painting it with your eye, trying to see what you're not seeing, and then move on. This is good practice for whether you intend to do calligraphy, whether you intend to do flowers, birds, landscapes, or even wild splash painting. We do need to already tune into not only the negative space, but the positive space. So let's get started. I'm going to put the model aside so I can see it in front of me. Second to the model, each lesson will have stroke order or stroke direction. And basically that tells us where to start. With this demarcation, we're thinking that the graphic here is really perpendicular to the page, so I'm not making a C stroke, but I'm making left to right, back to forth, and back again. So think of that graphic as being perpendicular to the page and going back, forth, back, just like a pendulum. So I'll put that aside so I can refer which stroke comes next. So now as we'll begin, we'll start on the right side top, work down column by column by column. So we start with a horizontal dot, and again, every Lee stroke has 3 movements. So I'll start going left, right, and left. And generally I'll make a little air stroke to be sure I know what I'm going to do before I commit to the paper. So horizontal dot, I go left, I press, I lift a bit as I move, and go back again. Go back to my dish, rework the brush, get my hairs parallel so I have a good point. Then I want to do a simple horizontal. Again, I'm going to leave a couple of fingers of space. Horizontal, I go left, right, left, and back. Again, back to the mixing dish. Indulge the brush, keep it well mixed and with a good point. Vertical, I'll start by going up, then down, then up again. So I go up, a little bit of a press, coming down, and back up again. Now, one caution is that I want to look at my model to see what I'm going to do next. In this case, it's a down to left. So I'll go up, down, up. I also, once I engage with the paper, my eye needs to be here. I can't be moving and looking at the model at the same time. So study the model, take a moment, get a sense of how am I beginning, how am I moving, how am I ending, and then move to the paper. But once you're engaged with the paper, your attention needs to be at that point where the brush is meeting the paper. Down to left, I go up, down, up. And my eye is here because the conditions of the brush, the ink in the brush, are in constant motion. So what a little press one time may spill a lot of ink, the next time it may not do much at all. So I need to be right at that point watching what is the brush doing now so I can either lift it or press it or go slower or go faster so I can I can continue to get a consistent line. Down to right, I go up, down, and back again. So that's my first column. So I need to get 4 columns on this page, so got the first one in place. I'll come back, pick up a little more ink. I don't need to do that too often if I continue to mix it as I go, but I'm going to start a new column, so I want to be sure I have a goodly amount of ink. Then my second column starts with a vertical dot. I go up, I press, let it spread a bit, lift as I come down, lift even more as I go back up. Go back to my dish, remix the ink. The second column is going to be pairs of lines. So I want to start a little higher than here so this can be centered as a pair of horizontals. I go left, right, left. Second one, left, right, left. And again, I want to pay attention to the white space when I'm doing pairs. I think of this as being like a magnet. I want them close enough so I can feel some pull, but not too close, far enough so I can feel some pull, but not too far. You want to create that sense of tension and energy being compressed in these pairs. Coming downward, parallel to what's to the right of me, I start with my first vertical. I go up, down, up. Second one up, down, up. Again, back to the dish, remix my ink. Now down to left, a pair of them. I can refer to my stroke direction sheet and see that I'm going to do the top one first, up, down, up, up, down, up. Then my down to right, again the top one is first. I go up, down, up, up, down, up. Now my third column will start with a down to right or down to left dot. So I go up, press, let it spread a little bit, lift as I come down, lift as I go back up. And just a note, dots are hard. You're not going to master that the first 10 times you do it. Just keep trying. The skills will move along with you. Now we're going to do thin and thick. Thin has all 3 movements. I go left, right, left, and then thick, all 3 movements, pressing more, going slower, left, right, left. Then vertical, starting with thick. I go up, down, up, and thin, up, down, up. Then we have down to left. I go up, down, up, and thick. Going slowly, pressing more, up, down, up. And then lastly on this column, down to right, thin, up, down, up, and thick, up, down, up. Then our last column, down to right dot, I go up, down, up. A little more ink now. My ink is getting a little bit slow. I want ink to flow. You don't want it to spill too much, but you also don't want it to dry. Horizontal, starting with the thick on top. So I press, go slow, let it spread, and then thin, lighter touch, left, right, left. Then horizontal or vertical, up, down, up, and then up, down, up. Down to left, thin, up, down, up, and then thick. Slower, more pressing, let it fill out. And then our last one for this page, down to right, thick, and then thin. Lighter touch, maybe move a little faster. And there we have our first complete page, single strokes in Lee style script. Before you go, one last note. The handouts for the Dance of the Eye and the Hand for beginning students and continuing students, all lessons, are posted as downloadable PDFs at www.laughingwatersstudio.com. Have a good day. You have been watching Distance Learning from Laughing Waters Studio.